Melissa.
And this is
the Jaywalkers Recovery Podcast. Hi, this is Melissa. Welcome to the Jaywalkers Recovery Podcast. Today we have TAMI D. Her sobriety date is 6/29/20.
Thank you for having me.
Yeah, we're glad you're here. I'm excited to hear your story. And yeah, so if you want to start with, your childhood or the first time you drank.
I think it would probably be good to kind of go back to my childhood.
Mhm.
So, parts that I remember was I was about 5 years old when my mom and dad divorced. Um, Things I know about my mom now that kind of contributed to my upbringing is, she didn't have the best childhood, and she was incredibly codependent, and so her upbringing sort of was, you get married, meet a man, get married, have children, the end. Which is unfortunate because she was incredibly smart and could have, she got scholarships for college, and she didn't utilize them because you meet a man, get married, have kids. And so when they divorced, there were a lot of men in and out of her life. And when I was about 12 years old, her parents died, and she had always wanted to own a tavern. And so with the inheritance, she bought a tavern where we lived, and became an alcoholic herself. And so it was, she was a single mom. And when she wasn't, at the bar working, she was at the bar drinking. And the quality of men in her life, as you can imagine, meeting in those kinds of situations were not great. And so I was exposed to a significant amount of abuse in all the ways. And I also remember moments of, my mom being so sick that she's, I'm holding her hair in the bathroom and she's crawling back to the bedroom because she's too sick to walk. And so those were some of my experiences in my early teens, and just kind of made things difficult for me. I didn't know that things were difficult. I was young, and you just kind of think that that's normal, that this is what everybody goes through. And yeah, so fast forward a little bit, my dad was in and out of my life after the divorce. He was kind of consistent every other weekend. And I didn't see my dad for years, really. And all of the things that happened to a young daughter with an absent father. And then, of course, my mom was, pretty absent. I mean, she made sure that my physical needs were taken care of, but, my emotional needs, not so much. And I was pretty much left on my own a lot of the time. And so, you leave a young child on their own a lot of the time. They're going to do things that they probably shouldn't be doing. So I was kind of out running the streets, running amok, trying to fill those holes, and so I started drinking at a very young age. I remember the first time I smoked marijuana was 12. I was actually smoking cigarettes at an even younger age. And I was addicted to meth by age 14. And, in relationships with boys at a very young age, just sort of, trying to fill my life, with those things that make you feel good for the moment, but ultimately leave you feeling even emptier in the end. Um, I was pregnant with my oldest son, Brady, by 18. And his biological father was 30. And he was himself was, he would use things like Coke, and he was a steroid user, kind of very, very into bodybuilding. And I think the steroids probably, they can tend to make people lose their temper. Really, yes, very aggressive. And so there were lots of moments in our relationship that were violent. But when I was about 8 months pregnant with Brady, he was incredibly violent. And at that point, I just kind of was like, enough is enough. And when he left, he left. Like he didn't really check on me or his son, and so I was a very young single mom. And I think I was probably about 8 months pregnant when I was like, I'm about to have a child and I have no means to take care of him. And so I put myself through beauty school and graduated beauty school. I had to take some time, maternity time off, and then come back and finish after I had him. But I did hair and nails for a while. And then this girl reached out to me during this period of time, and she was like, I'm your sister," and I'm like, I didn't know I had a sister. It was by our dad, so we have the same dad, different moms, and so through my connection with her, I was because she had found our dad. I was reacquainted with my dad. And when he came back into my life, he was unrecognizable. When I was younger, my dad was very into fitness. He was a health nut. Like he was attractive. All my little girlfriends was like, "Oh, your dad is so cute." And the man before me was like this very skinny, sucked up, long, scraggly hair. Um, Man that was talking about seeing screaming banshees. So a meth induced psychosis situation. He was very sick. And it was unfortunate because my sister never got to know the man that he used to be or, was. She was meeting him as the man that he is now. Um, and so that was a difficult time, but it was really cool to find out that I had a sister and to start developing a relationship with her. Unfortunately, she and I were both also, making choices in our life, drinking and things like that. And I can't speak to her story, but for me, I was just kind of I think it just sort of fueled my sickness. It's like, I moved to Portland. I quit doing hair. I started dancing. I started, doing exotic dancing, and it was a situation where I could drink and make money at the same time. And so I was getting involved even more heavily into drinking and using drugs and doing meth and I think things just really spiraled for me for a time.
And how old was your son at this point?
I think I used off and on for the first 10 years, 9 years of his life. He
Mhm.
was unfortunately raised in the brunt of my addiction.
Mhm.
And So I was about 29 and he was about 9
Mhm.
when when I had learned so I had learned that I could sell drugs and do mine for free, how business savvy of me.
Mhm.
And so because of that, I was driving without a license. I'd been pulled over so many times, just all of the wreckage that you create in your life when you're in the midst of your addictions. I was coming home from a bar. I got pulled over. And I was in St. Helens at the time. I got pulled over at the Safeway parking lot across the street from the high school at 2 a.m. And because of my history, then they were like searching my car and searching my belongings and found all kinds of things that they shouldn't find. I had a significant amount of drugs, meth on me. I had scales and just all the things because
Mhm.
you shouldn't have.
Yeah.
And so because they pulled me over across the street from a high school, they were trying to charge me with manufacturing and delivery within 1,000 feet of a schoolyard. Um, and so that was sort of the come to Jesus moment for me.
Mhm.
And fortunately, I'd never done treatment of any kind. And I was given an opportunity to go to an inpatient program in lieu of prison. I pled to a lesser charge. It was instead of within 1,000 feet of a schoolyard, they charged me with a manufacturing delivery charge.
Mhm.
And offered me. So I went to jail for a time, and then I went to an inpatient treatment program. My son went into a foster care system for about 60 days in total.
Mhm.
I was in jail incarcerated for 30 days, and at the time, I went through Pathways treatment program in St. Helens, and at the time, it was a 30-day program. But I did it. The judge told me, he was like, you can't dig your ditch any deeper, any wider. You're going to go to prison and you're going to lose your son. And so this judge ended up becoming a very important person in my life. His name is Judge Grove, and he essentially gave me enough, rope to either figure it out or hang myself,
Mhm.
And um, Brady had. Sorry, I'm going to get a little emotional.
Mhm.
My son Brady had been the only, like constant
Mhm.
in my life. Like men had come and gone, and relationships had come and gone, and
Mhm.
my father had come and gone, but my son was the only thing that like was constant in my life. Like
Yeah.
he was the thought of losing him and sort of having this realization of like what I was doing
Mhm.
um, created that change. I mean, I did it for me. You have to do this for you or it's not going to stick. But you do find your whys, and he was my why. And so I was 30 years old when I went through it and graduated treatment, and he was 9, almost 10. And so he suffered the brunt of my addiction for sure. But I also feel like I showed him a different way of living through my recovery journey, and tried to make an ongoing living amends in his life. You know, um, when he came home after treatment, something that I like to share with other women who have gone through what I went through with a child raised in addiction. You get sober, you get your kids back, you get them home, and there's a honeymoon period, where like you're so grateful that you have each other back, and things are good. But then the I don't know if I can, if it's okay to cuss, the shit sort of hits the fan. You're dealing with a child who has not had boundaries, who has not had consistency in their life, a child who has just kind of run amok. And now all of a sudden, there's all of these healthy boundaries and there's these rules, and you're paying attention. And while they need it and they crave it and they deserve it, there's resistance and there's pushback. And so it became really difficult because there was some serious, fits and tantrums, I remember moments where like I had to just kind of he was in I had to just sort of put him in his room and shut the door and kind of hold the door shut while he because he's 10 years old, a young boy at 10 who is just, acting out and reacting to that he doesn't have any more healthy coping skills than you had, and just sort of praying and crying out to God, like, is this what I got sober for? Because this is so hard. And then having to, remind myself, like, he is a mirror image of me in my addiction. And just like it's going to take time for me to heal, it's going to take time for him to heal. It's going to take time for him to see that, like, I'm not going anywhere, like, things are going to be better, things are not going to be the way that they were. And it's just it takes time for them to heal too. It's so funny in our addiction. We just like we're not hurting anybody but ourselves. That's the lie we tell ourselves. And we are, we are in so many ways that we don't even realize. Um, but I stayed in recovery. I did it. I um, reached out to my sponsor. I did the meetings. I was, very involved. I remember working at the Alana Club. I was very, very involved in the recovery community and kept myself right in the middle. Like they say, keep yourself right in the middle so you don't fall off the edge. So I talked a little bit about my dad, my biological father, and him coming back into my life. But before that happened, my oldest son, was probably about 4 years old, and I remember I didn't even like really know that my dad was using drugs. And I was at home, and it was late in the evening, like 10 o'clock, probably because it was like 10 o'clock news. And I was flipping through the channels, and all of a sudden I get to a channel, and there is like this news report with a picture of my dad on it with his name broadcast along the bottom of the picture. He had been arrested for basically kidnapping this woman and, holding her at knife point. And so that was sort of like how my found out where my dad was at. And, I say that because, we don't get to choose who our family is essentially, our relatives are. But we do get to choose the people that we allow in our life now. Like I have so many amazing people in my life today that support me and love me. And we are not our parents. We are not we have the opportunity to change our legacy. We are given, if you're given that opportunity and afforded such an opportunity to make these changes, we don't have to repeat um, and impart these things onto our family. We can change our legacy.
So you were having that kind of balance struggle with your son
Yeah,
when he came home. And you said
yeah.
he was about 10 years old during that time.
Mm-hmm.
And I feel like that's kind of like the age when kids also start getting into their like
Trouble.
preteen years, and they're trying to find themselves. And
Yeah. I think it really helped, being in the program and having him come because at the time, he would come to the meetings with me, a lot of them, or he would come to the Ilano Club and play with the other kids at the club. And, I think that helped because I just sort of drug him everywhere that I went. And I think that I want to say that and hope and pray that even that at that age that maybe he heard some things, or at least he saw that his mom um was sticking with it, because kids aren't stupid, and I think a lot of the times they're waiting for the other shoe to drop. They're waiting. They don't want us to fail, but they're just sort of waiting for the other shoe to drop. And so the more time that you're there, the more trust that you develop
Mhm.
between the two of you. You know, the more that they see that you're not, you know, going to go back out there, that you are meaning what you say, that you are, you know, walking the walk and
Mhm.
talking the talk, and that you're going to stick it out, and that they can feel safe with you
Mhm.
again. Um, and you know, one thing that I remember when I was in treatment, you know, I didn't have a faith necessarily, or a relationship with a higher power. I remember when I was very little that there was a bus that would go around. I went to Snoopyland preschool, and they had this little bus that would drive around and pick kids up for church on Sundays, and I would go by myself. And I remember at a very young age that there was what I now know as an altar call that I received, and I don't remember a lot about it, but I remember vaguely that that was like where I knew that I needed something more in my life.
Mhm.
Um, I needed something safe in my life, and I believe as a young child I gave myself to the I gave my heart to the Lord
Mhm.
at a very young age, but I didn't have anybody to explain to me, you know, what that meant, or to pour into my life, or to minister or disciple me in real tangible ways on a day-to-day basis. And so, you know, I continue to just sort of live my life in self, and fill all of those holes with things that, you know, felt good for the moment, but didn't have any, weren't sustainable. You know, they weren't, they didn't, nothing that was going to be long and lasting. You know, and like I said before, leaving you emptier in the end. And I remember when I went through treatment, I would, you know, they're talking about this higher power, and you know, you need to give yourself over to this higher power. You've got to find this higher power, you know. And so I didn't really, you know, at this point in my life, I didn't really know what that meant or what that looked like. And so I remember just sort of like waking up in the morning and saying, please help. Yeah, at the end of the night, if I was still in treatment, I didn't leave and I hadn't relapsed, then I was said thank you. And that was kind of how my prayer life started. But I'm so grateful to to Pathways, to the little residential treatment program that I went through, to the program of AA, who l- brought me to this place where I could discover my higher power, who I choose to call God. You know, I AA helped me discover my faith. You know, it helped me to realize that there is a power greater than myself that can relieve my everything. You know,
Mhm.
relieve all of the things. And has really, you know, I'm grateful through this program that I have now this amazing relationship with my God, that has carried me through some, probably, you know, the most difficult things that I've really ever had to endure. Um, and another thing that the program brought me was, yeah, a husband. You know, I did wait. I had a year, but then I met this man in the program. I actually had known him back in my using days, but he was not somebody that, you know, I really even kind of looked twice at. But he came into the program and he looked good. Like the program looked really good on him. And I saw
They
him,
always do.
yeah, I saw him in a completely different way. And I was absolutely smitten with him. And so we started seeing each other. We met and married very quickly. I think we dated for like 2 months before we decided to get married. And So we got married, and you know, we had talked about having children, and you know, we were going to wait about a year, and then he was, we talked about it and was like, why don't you just go ahead and get off birth control, and we'll let God decide. Well, 2 weeks later, I was pregnant with my son, my youngest son. And I found out later on down the road that you actually are more susceptible to getting pregnant right off birth control, which I would, had I known that, I might have waited, but I'm so grateful for my son, Wesley. Like, he's just an amazing young man. Uh, and I wouldn't change a thing there. And so anyway, so well, he's now my ex-husband. We were married for about, I want to say 14 years. Um, and we had a good run. He was, we were very involved in the recovery community. We were very involved in our church and ministry there. He was a youth group leader. We actually started a youth outreach that was encouraged by that judge that I mentioned earlier, Judge Grove. He encouraged us to do something, and so we did, and I want to say that outreach probably lasted for I don't know, like 9 years, a long time, and we got to see some really neat opportunities through that. There were parents. The courts were kind of using that as an opportunity for parents in the system to have visitations with their kids there. So it was kind of we got to be involved in some of the reunification process between parents and children, going through some of the same things that I had gone through, and my son had gone through. So that was a really pretty cool experience to be a part of. And my now ex-husband, I don't want to get too deep into his story, but he struggled with alcohol and addiction as well. And there was a sexual addiction that he hadn't dealt with in all of that. And so I found out, I want to say 10 or 11 years into our marriage, there were some things that I was being confronted with. And, there was always little things that I was like, that's interesting. And I'd kind of question him, and, he would basically kind of blow it off and shine it on like I'm crazy, you know? But come to find out, when I finally, really confronted him and he got honest, it was discovered that there had been, pretty much our entire marriage, there had been some sort of infidelities that were taking place. And so I left for about 6 months and took my son Wesley with me. And during that 6 months, I didn't get married to get divorced, and I didn't want to be a single mom again. Like, I had done that gig, and it's hard. And so he was getting help and going through programs and that were related to the specific issue. And he was showing me that he wanted things. He wanted to work on it. And so I came back and I stayed for probably about 3 or 4 years. But for me, things had just changed on a level that I couldn't overcome. And it wasn't from a lack of trying. I was reading books and going to counseling and doing marriage conferences and that were specific to women who have gone through what I was going through. But I feel like it just, there was a level of trust that had been broken to such a degree that it just wasn't coming back for me, and so I actually made the choice to pursue divorce, and through that, we separated, and unfortunately, my ex-husband started using again to a pretty severe degree. So my that affected and impacted our son immensely, because he had always had this strong man in his life, who now was just kind of not in his life as much, and that was really, really hard on him. I started making, I got on dating sites, and started making allowances in my life that I would never normally have made, going on dates with guys that were, drinking, and I didn't for a while. But then it was 2017, New Year's of 2017, and I went out with this guy and, made a choice, and I started drinking again. And I quote unquote managed my drinking for a time. And I was out there for probably about 2.5 years. Um, but then my mom passed away. And I didn't manage that at all. And so for 6 months, I want to say 6 months, I was drinking, you know, to pass out. I didn't want to feel. Um, and unfortunately, my youngest son, who'd never, seen me do anything, was now seeing his mom as a drunk. Um, so that hurts, to think back on that. Like, um, that hurts. uh, but during that period of drinking, I had friends that were still in the recovery community that were like, I have my really one of my really good friends. Um, and I don't know if I'm supposed to say names on here or not. But so a really close friend of mine, she was still, trying to impart recovery in my life, and she's like, "Hey, why don't you come to this meeting with me?" And I knew that things were not great, but I wasn't ready to stop. I wasn't ready to stop drinking, but I would go to a meeting with her from time to time, and through that, I met, this amazing woman who is now my sponsor. And another amazing woman in my life was encouraging me to ask her to be my sponsor, and I was like, yeah, okay, we'll see. But like I said, I just wasn't ready to make any changes in my life. And after my mom passed, and I was drinking constantly. I managed to. I was blessed with a DUI about 2.5 years into my drinking, and I say blessed because it took that for me to go, how in the world did I end up back here? Like it was well over 14 years since I'd gotten into any kind of trouble, since the scene of me and my last crime. And to end up back where I was at, like going through this was just mind blowing to me. And so that was a Sunday night, was the 29th of June of 2020. It was a Sunday evening, and I woke up Monday morning incredibly hungover, incredibly broken, and made a plan. I reached out to this woman, um, Kathy S., who is my sponsor. And I called her. I'd gotten her number, and I called her, and I'm like, "This is the deal. This is what's happened, and will you be my sponsor?" Absolutely. She didn't even question it or question me. She was like, "Absolutely, 100%." I had reached out to one of my close friends and made plans to have lunch with her. I had been very involved in the CrossFit community, and I had kind of burned some bridges there with my CrossFit coach, because I had been involved in, there's a free recovery CrossFit class that I was also involved in helping to develop. And I had relapsed and broken that relationship in the process. And so I reached out to her because I knew that fitness was an important part of my recovery, and made amends to her. And I just set up this plan. I'm going to meet with a sponsor. I'm going to meet with my friends that are in recovery. I'm going to get back into fitness, and I held to that plan. And so I was able to, celebrate another 4 years for the last time, I hope, on the 29th of June. And I've gone through, some really difficult times in these 4 years. I have probably went through the most difficult thing I've ever had to go through because my oldest son, um, he didn't, he struggled with alcohol and addiction issues himself. Um, and I had shown him a different way. He knew there was help out there, and he would occasionally seek it. Um, but he was a very proud man. And although he did not die from an overdose, I believe his death was a direct result of drugs and alcohol, and just sort of going through making choices um, that impacted him in ways that you know he just needed help. And so I lost my oldest son, Brady, on March 15th. Sorry. He was, you know, making some poor choices in his life because he was using, and so he was getting himself in, financial situations where he was just, and I don't want to go too deep into what he was and wasn't doing. It's just that he was making decisions in his life that were a direct result of alcohol and drugs, and being an alcoholic and addict. And it brought him to a place of hopelessness and fear. And he was doing crazy things, and he was on his motorcycle on March 15th, and he was doing about 80 miles an hour through an intersection, and he collided with a 1-ton pickup truck. He hit it so hard it spun the truck around 180 degrees. Wow. And I was told that basically he was killed on impact. And that was 6 days before his 30th birthday. He was going to turn 30 on the 21st. And, sorry. A lot of people have asked me, like, how can you not lose your faith through something like this? And while I question God, I've asked him, like, I don't understand, and I probably will never understand this side of heaven. I know that my God is not a liar, and that he uses everything, and so I think for me, like, my prayer, my cry, my plea to God is that, like, somebody will hear the story and, like, get help and realize that you don't have to do this alone, that you're not too far gone, you're not too broken, you're not too anything to get help. And so that's my prayer, that's my plea, is that his death won't be in vain. And that I trust, I've seen God work in my life. I've seen him use everything, every dark, dirty, disgusting thing in my life to help others, you know, because that's what this is about. You know, if I hear a woman who's gone through things that I've or done things that I've done that I'm too ashamed to talk about, but they're talking about it, and they're okay, like they're still loved, and I see that there's hope, and so that's why I'm trying to walk through this with as much grace and faith as I can.
We can't keep it if we don't give it away.
Yeah,
Mhm.
yeah. I have to tell you too that during this time, while I've experienced probably the greatest pain that I've ever experienced, and I get to do it sober, I've also felt so much love um, and compassion at the same time. Like I used to say my circle was little but mighty. I was so wrong. The circle of people in my community, from my recovery community, my CrossFit community, my church community, like it has been so humbling. The outpouring of love and support and people making sure that, our needs are met and that I can take time off of work and, you know, helping to plan my son's service and carrying it through to fruition and helping make decisions for me because I couldn't, has just been it's just been amazing to because our addict minds,
Yeah.
I used to think people just tolerated
Mhm.
me, but it's so not true.
Yeah.
It's such a
That's so
lie.
huge to just have that community that comes around you when you're going through something like that.
And they have come through in force, boy, I tell you. It's just been such a humbling, truly humbling experience to see just how loved my family is, and to be able to just trust in that and rest in that and accept it
Mhm.
honestly because that's hard for a lot of us,
Yeah.
you know,
Mhm.
just be able to accept the help um, and being able to just sort of sit in my grief for a while
Mhm.
because I think that's important too. I mean, we've spent so much of our life like numbing
Mhm.
everything out, and I feel like it was kind of strange, honestly, because for a while I felt like my pain kept me connected to him.
Mhm.
Like if I wasn't feeling pain, I was feeling guilty
Mhm.
because I wasn't feeling pain. Um, and it just kind of helped me stay feeling connected to him. And also, I felt like it was kind of a way that I honor him, is by allowing myself to feel everything.
Mhm.
And I've learned a lot about myself through this process and a lot about grief through this process and just being okay to not be okay,
Yes. That's huge.
and the people in my life sort of allowing me to just cry when I need to cry. I joked I'm for a while I was a bit like Oregon weather, sobbing and bawling one minute, laughing almost maniacally the next, just a roller coaster of emotions. Um, I have had some pretty so I had my friend and I had planned this trip last year. We planned and paid for the trip last year to go to Belize in May for her birthday. And I had done a lot of preparation for that. It's because we were going to go scuba diving and I had to get certified to do that. Um, but when we, planned and paid for the trip, I had no idea that I was going to be walking through the loss of a child to, uh, and 2 months later, the trip was supposed to take place in May. So he passed in March and the trip was in May. And I really questioned whether I should even go. Honestly, my heart wasn't in it. And a lot of the people in my life were encouraging me to still go. And, um, and so I decided to go, But one of the things that sort of helped me get excited about going was I decided to take some of Brady's ashes with me. And I had an opportunity to dive in the waters and to release some of his ashes in the beautiful reefs of Belize. And that trip was a lot of things. I met great people and ate good food, and I laughed and I cried, and I'm so glad that I went, because I almost didn't. And I feel like there was just sort of a healing moment there. I don't think, and let me be clear, I don't think that I will ever be healed from this. Like, this isn't something that I'm going to like come out the other side of ever. But I do believe that I am learning to live with the pain, and I'm learning to find joy, and it's okay to have joy. Because for a while, for several months, I didn't think it was okay. Survivor's guilt is real, you know. Um, I do believe that I am going to walk through this. I am going to learn to live with. But it's not something that I think is ever just going to. I'm not ever gonna. It's not gonna be like one day everything is great.
Right.
You know. Yeah, it's been a journey for sure.
Wow. Thank you for sharing. That's such a beautiful, powerful story. And I know that somebody is going to hear this and be encouraged and have hope. Do you have any advice for someone that's new, that's trying to get clean and sober?
Lots of advice. How much time you got?
Yeah.
No, I think honestly, to humble yourself, be brave. I think for me, especially after my relapse, one of the most difficult things was getting up the courage to walk back into the rooms. I was very arrogant in my recovery previous. I was pretty judgmental. And so for somebody like that to then have to, muster up the courage to come back into the rooms, it was difficult. And so I would say be brave, willing, remain willing, get a sponsor, go to meetings, work the steps, and continue to work the steps every day in your life. Like I feel like running through the steps daily and just doing a personal, checking in and taking inventory of myself for that day, and have I harmed anyone, and do I need to apologize? And doing that before I go to bed, I think is really important. Keeping your side of the street clean, you can't be responsible for other people's actions and reactions, but you can be responsible for yours. And I think it's just really important to keep yourself in the middle of this program. I didn't the last time, and I relapsed. I thought that I could do this. I could do it just, pour myself into fitness. I didn't need a sponsor. I don't need to go to meetings, and I relapsed, and I created more wreckage in my life through that relapse. So I think it's important to do what the program suggests, and to not think that you can do it better or different or tweak something. Just, and get a sponsor that's not going to tell you everything that you want to hear. I think I feel, a lot of people today don't want to be offended and are easily offended. And so they look for people who are not going to speak truth into their life in such a way that is offensive to them. I say, screw that. You need somebody that's going to be gut-wrenchingly real and honest with you, that they're going to hold you accountable. And if you're, slipping, they're going to be like, hey, this is what I'm seeing, and not afraid to hurt your feelings in the process.
Tell you the truth.
Yeah. I think that's really important. Yeah.
Well, thank you so much for being here today and telling your story. It was amazing, powerful, and, you can definitely see that you have a purpose and God's using you for that purpose. And I just thank you so much.
Thank you, Melissa. Thanks for having me.
Thanks for listening to the Jaywalkers Recovery Podcast. If you enjoyed the show, please give us a 5-star review on Spotify or Apple Podcasts. You can also join us on YouTube or Facebook for some bonus videos and pictures. Thanks again for tuning in.